The Middle Ages, often called the Dark Ages, is one of the most misunderstood periods in history. Many people believed it was a miserable era filled with poverty, ignorance, and the suppression of science, where nothing changed for 1,000 years. This view suggested that Europe remained backward until the Renaissance and Reformation came to the rescue. Some even claim the Dark Ages didn't truly end until the political revolutions of the 1700s. For years, famous figures like Carl Sagan helped spread this idea. In his 1980 book titled Cosmos, Sagan called this period a millennium gap in human progress and presented a chart suggesting there were no scientific advancements between 500 and 1500 AD. But modern historians came to the rescue and disagreed. They argued that the Middle Ages were actually filled with innovation and growth. Despite the evidence, the myth persists in movies, TV shows, and viral YouTube videos that paint medieval life as unbearably harsh. Yet, if things were that bad, how did our ancestors not only survive but thrived? Well, the truth is, the Middle Ages were much more complex and interesting. And so, we uncover the real story behind this so-called Dark Age. The Middle Ages spanned about 1,000 years, starting around the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD and ending with the Renaissance. Historians divided this period into three parts: the Early Middle Ages, the High Middle Ages, and the Late Middle Ages. The story begins with the Early Middle Ages, a time when the Western Roman Empire finally collapsed after centuries of decline. Rome's fall didn't just happen all of a sudden. For over 200 years, the empire had been weakening due to corruption, poor leadership, and constant attacks. When the empire finally crumbled, many Roman citizens didn't even notice or were glad to be rid of their broken government. Meanwhile, the Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued on. But it, too, never fully regained the glory of old Rome. It's also important to remember that many of the issues that people blame on the Middle Ages, like low life expectancy, plagues, and high infant mortality, were problems that even ancient Rome and Greece faced. Criticizing the Middle Ages for these issues while glorifying ancient civilizations is simply unfair. When Rome fell, new kingdoms emerged across Europe, led by Germanic tribes like the Goths and Franks. The early Middle Ages lasted until about the 10th century. There was poverty, and much of Roman knowledge about law and engineering was lost. Invaders like the Vikings and Arab raiders created chaos, and piracy made the Mediterranean Sea unsafe for trade. Plagues swept across Europe and slowed down development. But even during these tough times, people kept working to improve their lives. The Europeans didn't just sit around waiting for better days. Trade slowly grew, and banking systems developed. By the 9th century, parts of Northern Europe were experiencing an economic boom. Some Vikings even realized they could make more money trading than raiding. Financial tools like loans and investments helped the economy grow, and markets where people could buy and sell goods became more common. Despite the challenges, people were not starving or miserable as the myths suggest. As Rome's power faded, the church became more important, shaping society and helping preserve knowledge. By 756 AD, the Pope even had his own territories, known as the Papal States, giving the church significant influence across Europe. But rather than suppressing knowledge, the church helped to spread and protect it. Monasteries, where monks lived and worked, became centers of learning. Monks spent their days copying important books and studying religious texts. They lived simple, disciplined lives focusing on prayer, study, and hard work. Saint Benedict, a key figure in monastic life, taught that monks should read and learn every day. These monks also wrote religious histories and biographies. Monasteries back then weren't just religious places. They helped their communities in practical ways. Monks studied science and math, preserved ancient texts, and taught grammar, logic, and even astronomy. Books were incredibly valuable, and if a monastery was attacked, monks would hide their precious manuscripts to keep them safe. Over time, these monastic centers evolved into the first universities, spreading education to more people. Monasteries also played a vital role in feeding the poor and caring for the sick. They grew crops, raised animals, and made goods like wine. During tough times, they provided food and shelter to those in need. The monks' selfless work earned them respect, and the Christian faith spread quickly across Europe. It's no wonder Catholicism became so dominant. The Church was a source of hope and stability. Around the 10th century, the High Middle Ages began, and this is when the Dark Ages myth really falls apart. Europe was becoming more prosperous and united, and scientific progress was happening everywhere. Historian Seb Falk has shown that this period was full of innovation, not stagnation. Yes, there were still problems. Plagues didn't just disappear, and wars were common. But these issues weren't particularly unique to Europe. The whole world faced similar struggles. When people criticize medieval Europe for its hardships, it's important to ask, compared to what? During the High Middle Ages, cities like Venice, Genoa, and Pisa became economic powerhouses. These Italian city-states built strong navies to fight pirates and bring order back to the Mediterranean Sea. Kingdoms like England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire grew in power, and trade flourished. The demand for goods like linen, wool, and salt created a thriving market. Trade fairs became major events, connecting people from all over Europe. Agriculture also saw incredible advancements. The heavy plow made farming easier and more productive, and the horse collar allowed horses to pull heavy loads without hurting themselves. Windmills replaced animal labor for grinding grain, and iron horseshoes made work more efficient. These changes meant more food and better living conditions. Despite what some believed, medieval people were not backward or lazy. They were smart and resourceful, constantly coming up with new ways to improve their lives. Life in medieval Europe was challenging, but it wasn't as bleak as some would imagine. People worked hard, but they also had time for celebrations. Justice was strict in medieval Europe. Crimes like theft or harming someone's livestock were taken seriously, and punishments were severe. But some argue that today's justice systems could learn from the Middle Ages. In modern times, criminals often got away with minor consequences, while medieval society demanded accountability. Medicine also improved. The idea of hospitals, where trained doctors cared for patients, spread across Europe. Many hospitals were started by Christian monks and nuns. Surgeons like Theodoric Borgognoni developed antiseptic methods for cleaning wounds, which saved countless lives. These medical advancements often happened in church-run universities, showing that science and faith worked together. The late Middle Ages began after the Black Death, a horrific plague that swept through Europe from 1346 to 1353. It killed millions, but it wasn't just a European disaster. The plague affected the entire world. China lost up to 90% of some populations, and Egypt lost 60% of its people. Europe was hit hard, but it wasn't the only place suffering. The Black Death changed society. With fewer people, workers could demand better wages, and conditions improved. By the 1400s, Europe was recovering. The Renaissance began, bringing art, science, and new ways of thinking. But this new era was built on what had come before. The Middle Ages laid the foundation for many Renaissance achievements. So why do people still believe in the Dark Ages myth? Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn once said, "To destroy a people, you must first sever their roots." The myth has been used to undermine European and Catholic history. By portraying the Middle Ages as a time of ignorance, critics can push their own ideas and dismiss the past. But thanks to the internet and independent researchers, more people are learning the truth every day. The myth is slowly fading, and people are starting to recognize the incredible achievements of the Middle Ages. Countries like England, Denmark, and Austria most definitely owe their foundations to this era. Well, that's all for today. We sure hope this video helps you see the Middle Ages in a new light. And if you enjoyed this journey through history, please like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. This is Past and Places, and we'll see you in the next video.